This is the story of Carl Edon. In 1972, a boy named Carl Edon was born in Middlesbrough, England. His mother Valerie and his father James were Christians who did not believe in reincarnation. However, when Carl was about 2 years old, he began to say that he crashed a plane through a window. He said this more and more as time passed. In addition, he said he was on a mission to bomb England before his plane crashed. He also made the Nazi salute with his right arm when he began talking about his past life. Carl liked to draw. He drew swastikas, badges, and insignias, and he drew the German eagle. Furthermore, he drew a panel of an airplane cockpit and he explained the functions of all the gauges, and he said the red foot pedal was used to release bombs. Carl's parents did not teach him things about World War II and Nazi Germany, and they didn't have any books with this information. Additionally, Carl didn't watch any TV shows with this information, therefore they were surprised by Carl's knowledge of the war.
What made Carl's recollections even more interesting to researchers was the fact that the 5-year-old had virtually no access to information about Germany or World War II.
There's no way he could have picked any information up in the house. I was born after the war. I wasn't a great watcher of war films. I didn't have any war books or war planes in the house.
One day, Carl told James that he flew a bomber plane called the Messerschmitt 110. Since James was born not long after the Second World War, he knew a bit about World War II, and he thought Carl was wrong. Therefore, he told Carl the Messerschmitt was a fighter plane, not a bomber plane. Later, James went to the library to see who was correct. He learned that Carl was correct. When Carl watched a World War II documentary with his parents, he pointed out the factual errors. For example, he said the sergeant in the documentary was wearing his badges on the wrong side of his uniform. James went to the library and learned Carl was correct. When Carl was about 10 years old, a British magazine, Woman's Own, published an article about Carl's story. A year later, a German reporter interviewed Carl's family and published the information in the Berlin newspaper, Morgen Post. Because of all the attention Carl was getting on the news, some of Carl's classmates harassed Carl. They called him Hitler and Nazi, and they said he was making things up to get on the news. Carl decided to stop talking about his past life. At 22 years old, Carl got into an argument with a coworker, and the coworker stabbed Carl to death. A childhood friend of Carl learned about Carl's murder, and he was surprised because Carl predicted his own death. According to the friend, Carl said he would not live to the age of 25, and he said he would bleed to death. Several years later, Carl's prediction came true. Surprisingly, 2 years after Carl's death, workers digging a pipeline in Middlesbrough discovered a German bomber from World War II. The location of this discovery was less than a half a mile from where Carl was murdered. Moreover, authorities found the 4 bodies who were in the plane, and they learned the plane was destroyed in 1942. According to Carl's parents, Carl said he died in his previous life in 1942. One of the Nazis killed in the plane crash was Heinrich Richter. There were several similarities between him and Carl. First, Carl looked similar to Heinrich. Second, Carl had a birthmark on the upper part of his right leg, and he said he lost his right leg in World War II. Similarly, Heinrich lost his leg in World War II. Third, Carl bled to death. Likewise, when Heinrich's plane went down, he crashed through the plane window and he bled to death. Fourth, Carl followed the railway track from Skinningrove to Middlesbrough just before he was murdered. Similarly, Heinrich traveled by plane from Skinningrove to Middlesbrough following the railway track. But then his plane was destroyed and that's how he died. If Carl was Heinrich in his past life, then he got his past life name wrong. He said his name was Robert. Also, he said he was in a Messerschmitt when he died. However, Heinrich died in a Dornier bomber. Carl had other similarities with Germans and German soldiers. For example, he stood up straight and he had his hands to his sides, and he did the Nazi goose step when he was young. Like many Germans, Carl was neat and tidy, and he loved coffee even though his parents loved tea, and tea is incredibly popular in England. Also, Carl loved sausages, and when he was young, he insisted on playing the role of a German in a school play. In the end, Valerie accepted Carl as the reincarnation of Heinrich Richter, and James found Carl's statements more believable since the discovery of the World War II bomber plane. Though 4 bodies were associated with the plane, only Heinrich's body was placed next to Carl's body. When Carl's parents attended Heinrich's funeral, Valerie said it felt like burying Carl again. If you like spirituality, science, art, or animals, then be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget to turn on the notification bell.